Left-handedness. For centuries, society treated being left-handed as a defect that needed to be trained out of children. But modern brain scans reveal it may actually be a sign of higher intelligence. Only about 10% of people are left-handed, and scientists have spent decades trying to figure out what makes them so smart. A 400,000-person study from the UK Biobank and the Max Planck Institute confirmed that left-handed and ambidextrous individuals show a distinct neurological difference compared to the right-handed majority. Their brains are highly symmetrical, and the corpus callosum, the structure connecting the two hemispheres, tends to be physically larger. Researchers believe this happens because left-handers spend their entire lives navigating a world built backward for them. Every time you use a right-handed mouse, a spiral-bound notebook, or scissors that don't work the way you use them, your brain adapts. That constant adaptation is thought to build stronger communication between brain hemispheres, which translates to faster processing of complex language, better divergent thinking, and superior spatial reasoning. The world may not have been designed for you, but your brain took it personally and evolved. Nearsightedness. Surviving childhood with thick glasses usually meant dealing with relentless jokes. But the kids who mocked you had no idea your terrible vision was a sign that you were probably a lot smarter than them. Large-scale genomic studies, including the Gutenberg Health Study of over 14,000 individuals, found an undeniable link between nearsightedness and higher cognitive ability. Geneticists call this pleiotropy, meaning one single gene controls multiple unrelated traits simultaneously. In this case, the specific genes responsible for the kind of eye growth that causes nearsightedness heavily overlap with the genes driving advanced brain development. You didn't get bad eyesight because you read in the dark. You got it because the genetic code building your vision was also building a high-level cognitive processor, and it prioritized your brain over your eyes. Anthropologists add an interesting layer to this. They theorize that nearsighted early humans were the ones doing close-up work, the toolmakers, the planners, the ones thinking 3 steps ahead. Their intelligence helped them survive and pass those genes on, and now here you are, functionally blind the second you drop a contact lens on the bathroom floor. Above average height. Line up 1,000 people by height and test them all for cognitive ability, and you'd find a pattern that nobody really expected, but the data keeps confirming anyway. Researchers at the University of Edinburgh analyzed thousands of individuals and found a measurable genetic correlation between height and intelligence. Scientists theorize this comes from shared biological pathways. The genetic markers that drive optimal bone growth during childhood appear to be closely linked to the markers driving brain development. In other words, a body that had the resources to build a taller frame also had the resources to build a denser, faster neural network. If you're on the shorter side, the research has an incredible consolation prize. Extensive longitudinal studies show that shorter individuals tend to live significantly longer and have drastically lower rates of age-related cellular disease. The tall person sitting across from you might have edged you out on the cognitive assessment, but statistically speaking, you're likely to outlast them by a decade, which is arguably the better deal. Body hair. Feeling the need to apologize before taking your shirt off at the pool might feel like a genetic curse, but research suggests that men who are very hairy are significantly more likely to be highly intelligent. Conducted by Dr. Ikarakuti alias, a 20-year study found that 45% of highly educated males and Mensa members looked like they were wearing a sweater at the beach, compared to only 10% of the general population. Biologists believe the connection is directly related to testosterone and androgen exposure during fetal development. The hormonal environment creating heavy physical hair growth also appears to trigger the neurodevelopmental pathways associated with logical and spatial intelligence. The two aren't causing each other, but rather seem to be products of the same underlying hormonal conditions in the womb. If you've ever been self-conscious about looking like a werewolf, you've got it all wrong. What feels like a grooming nightmare, peer-reviewed literature suggests, might actually be a sign that you're pretty dang smart. Large pupils. Most people assume pupil size is just about how much light is in the room. It's not. And the difference may be an indicator of just how smart you are. Cognitive psychologists at the Georgia Institute of Technology found that baseline pupil size in moderate lighting directly correlates with fluid intelligence and working memory capacity. Larger resting pupil size was consistently linked with higher scores on both. Researchers believe pupil size physically reflects the activity of the locus coeruleus, a brain region regulating attention, focus, and processing speed. A larger resting pupil is thought to be a visible indicator of a more efficient underlying neural network, one that can hold and manage more complex information at the same time. Centuries ago, women used belladonna to dilate their pupils for vanity purposes, but as it turns out, your naturally larger pupils are advertising something far more valuable than beauty alone. Blonde hair. Enduring decades of terrible jokes about being intellectually vacant is an occupational hazard for natural blondes, but the genetic data suggests those stereotypes are entirely wrong. An Ohio State University study analyzed nearly 11,000 Americans and found that naturally blonde women had a slightly higher average IQ score than women with brown, auburn, or black hair. The difference wasn't extreme, but it was enough to be statistically significant. Scientists point out that blonde hair doesn't cause higher intelligence. The link is purely geographic. Because blonde hair is a recessive trait, it only became common in isolated northern populations. Surviving those freezing winters required serious long-term planning and problem-solving, so that environment selected for intelligence right alongside the gene for lighter hair. The two traits simply evolved together. The hair color itself isn't giving you an intellectual advantage, but it came packaged with a higher IQ, which means the next time someone tries to tell a dumb blonde joke, you can smile knowing the data says you're probably smarter than the person telling it. Long legs. Struggling to find pants that fit properly because your legs are disproportionately long might be annoying, but that specific skeletal ratio is a physical marker of an early cognitive advantage. According to a 53-year longitudinal study from the UK Medical Research Council, researchers found that for every additional inch of leg length relative to trunk size, individuals scored measurably higher on IQ tests of verbal intelligence and memory. The correlation held consistently across the full 5-decade span of the study. Both long legs and higher cognitive scores appear to be products of the same favorable conditions during early childhood. Superior nutrition and a low-stress developmental environment drive longer bone growth in the legs during the exact same years your brain is in its most critical growth period. Your body didn't have to fight off malnutrition or severe stress, so it poured all its surplus energy into building longer limbs and a sharper mind. The next time you're struggling to find jeans that actually reach your ankles, remember that extra leg length is just a visible indicator that your brain had the perfect environment to grow. Large head circumference. Apologies to your mother, but being born with a disproportionately large head that made your delivery a nightmare provided a lifelong structural advantage for your intelligence. Scientists analyzed health data from 500,000 individuals in the UK Biobank and found that babies born with larger-than-average head circumferences scored significantly higher on cognitive reasoning tests later on. The sample size alone makes this finding difficult to dismiss. A larger skull at birth accommodates more rapid brain volume growth during the first critical years of life. More physical space for neural development appears to translate into a measurable advantage in verbal and numerical reasoning that persists into adulthood. Researchers found that larger head size also correlates with higher levels of education and higher scores on complex problem-solving tasks decades later. Even after accounting for variables like family background and socioeconomic status, the cranial metric stood on its own as a primary indicator. Your poor mother probably didn't appreciate that extra circumference at the time, but the data confirms it was the ultimate investment in your cognitive future. Late puberty. If you were the last of your friends to hit puberty and spent middle school feeling completely left behind, the research has some great retroactive news. The National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent Health tracked teenagers into adulthood and found that those who hit puberty later ended up with significantly higher adult IQs than their early developing peers. Neuroscientists believe this comes down to neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to grow, adapt, and build complex networks. Before puberty, that window of growth is wide open. When a rush of sex hormones floods the system, they effectively lock the brain's structural growth in place to focus on physical maturity. Late bloomers get a much longer pre-puberty window. More time before that hormonal lock sets in means more time for the prefrontal cortex to grow, which researchers believe allows for a higher cognitive ceiling. Those awkward middle school years when your voice still cracked while the guy next to you grew a mustache were just the tuition you paid for a much smarter adult brain. Eye color. Eye color research is less about one group being smarter than another and more about two genuinely different cognitive strengths. University of Louisville researchers studying thousands of individuals found a consistent correlation between light eye color, specifically blue and gray, and much higher performance on self-paced, strategic, and long-term planning tasks. Dark-eyed individuals, by contrast, consistently outperformed on fast-paced, reactive tasks requiring quick decision-making under pressure. Researchers believe this reflects a fundamental difference in how your brain physically processes incoming information. The exact same genetic markers that dictate your eye pigment are closely linked to neural pathways that govern sustained attention versus rapid response. Neither pigment is superior, they just support completely different ways of operating. In the real world, this means light-eyed individuals are biologically optimized for deep, sustained focus. They naturally excel at analyzing complex data, mastering delayed gratification, and mapping out intricate, multi-step strategies without losing sight of the final goal. Meanwhile, dark-eyed individuals have a cognitive edge the second the clock starts ticking. Their brains are wired to instantly process rapidly changing information, filter out the chaos, and execute the smartest possible choice in a split second. So, if you're looking for someone to mastermind the perfect bank heist, find a friend with blue eyes. But if you need someone to safely drive the getaway car, make sure their eyes are brown. Finger length. Hold out your hand and look at it for a second. If your ring finger is noticeably longer than your index finger, you are carrying a visible marker for a highly analytical mind. Researchers across multiple university studies have found that individuals with a longer ring finger perform significantly better on tasks involving complex mathematical computation and advanced spatial reasoning. Finger length ratios are permanently determined in the womb, and scientists believe they serve as a record of your prenatal testosterone exposure. The higher the testosterone exposure during fetal development, the longer your ring finger grows. That same early hormonal environment fundamentally organizes your brain's architecture to heavily favor high-level spatial awareness and logical problem-solving. Your hand didn't cause your high IQ, it just recorded the data. Your finger length was permanently set before you took your first breath, reflecting the chemical environment that wired your brain to excel at Tetris and parallel park without needing a backup camera. Physical attractiveness. The idea that someone can be highly attractive but completely empty-headed might make for a great movie theme, but human history shows that good looks are actually linked to high intelligence. Evolutionary psychologist Satoshi Kanazawa analyzed 52,000 individuals across the US and the UK and found that physically attractive people with highly symmetrical faces scored an average of 14 points higher on IQ tests, which is more than just a significant difference. Kanazawa's theory points to thousands of years of assortative mating. Historically, highly intelligent individuals tended to achieve higher social status, giving them access to a wider and more selective pool of partners. They consistently chose the most attractive, symmetrical mates because symmetry is the ultimate biological sign of strong genetics. Over dozens of generations, high intelligence and physical attractiveness became genetically linked in their offspring. The brilliant and the beautiful paired up, passing both distinct advantages down together. The Hollywood cliché of all looks but no brains is mostly a myth. Statistically, they're probably outsmarting you too. If you made it through this entire list and found yourself nodding along to more than a few of these, that is either very good news or a remarkable coincidence. Then again, statistics don't apply to everyone. If you have every trait in this video and you're still a complete dimwit, congratulations on beating the scientific odds.